My name is Claire McHugh, and I'm 13 years old in 8th grade at Marin Primary Middle School in Cordoba. My child of war is my Grandma Lola, Connie McHugh. Grandma Lola has told me stories about her time during the war, and I did a podcast about her experience, the person I most admire. Grandma Lola, can you tell us a story about the little boy?
Thank you, Claire. You and my other two grandchildren on the panel, Consuelo and Kirby, have been such a support to me listening to my stories. I want to give you an idea when I talk to young people what it was like to be a child of war, to be a child of this war. Just imagine if you and your family had no telephone, no radio, of course TV wasn't invented, or nor was the internet. There was no mail, no newspapers, no car, no running water, no electricity. Your parents could not get any money because the banks were closed. There were no schools, no grocery stores, and very little food. And your streets were full of soldiers with bayonets at the end of their rifles. And there were barbed wire barricades in the streets. Wouldn't you be very scared? On January 9th, 1942, my father was in prison as a prisoner of war at the Santo Tomas camp. We could not talk to him or see him or communicate with him. 3 years later, in January 1945, my mother, grandmother, aunt, and uncle were arrested by Japanese soldiers. They took them away from our home after they ransacked it, and we did not know what had happened to them. We did not know how to find our dad to tell him either. We were just 4 children without our mom and dad, and we lived underneath our house during the bombing raids, along with many neighbors who had no place to go because their houses had been burned. And then we heard that American soldiers were close by, and we had to leave because our home was a military target. So with our neighbors, we walked toward the American side. But before we got to safety, something I have never been able to forget happened. A neighborhood friend, and I refer to him as our little boy, was shot to death right in front of us by a Japanese sniper. We couldn't breathe, we couldn't scream, we were so scared all we could do was cry and cry for our little boy. And each year when we get together with our old neighbors, we were also lived in the Malate district, we cry again for our little boy. This was something I have never been able to forget. The American soldiers fed us and gave us clean water, and we slept out in the streets next to a wall, and at night we watched with childlike wonder as the sky lit up with bomb bursts, flares, and tracers from the guns. Then a miracle happened. Our cousin found us in the rubble, and he took us to Santo Tomas to find our father. We walked for 10 miles behind tanks for protection. The streets were full of people who had been killed, and there were no buildings, no churches, no houses, no bridges, no trees, because they had all been destroyed. When we reached Santo Tomas, we were so happy to see Dad. "Where's Mommy? Where's Mommy?" he asked us with tears in his eyes. We said we didn't know, that she had been taken away and she never came back. Then after the war ended, we heard that our mother, grandmother, aunt, and uncle had all been killed. This broke our hearts, and we cried even more. We think about our mom all the time. We have missed her all our lives. We are like so many others who have lost family members and friends. We don't want to forget them, so we remember and honor them by telling their stories. This is my family's story, and I thank you for listening.
Hello. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is it? Yeah. Thank you very much, Grandma. I know everyone was touched by your story.